Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I am Damon Martin.
And I am the final Patrick Guerra.
And Patrick, we are almost to the end of our Final Destination franchise review as we await the release of Final Destination Bloodlines in May. As I mentioned an episode ago or 2 episodes ago, we don't generally speed through the franchise reviews. Sometimes they take an entire year, but this time we kind of wanted to get to the end because the new one opens in May. So here we are at the final old version of Final Destination with Final Destination 5.
Final Destination 5, starring the likes of the late great Tony Todd again as Bloodworth, Courtney B. Vance as Agent Block, David Koechner as Dennis, Arlen Escarpeta as Nathan, PJ Byrne as Isaac, Jacqueline McInnes Wood as Olivia, Ellen Rowe as Candace, Miles Fisher as Peter, Emma Bell as Molly, and Nicholas D'Agosto as Sam, with a budget of $40 million and a worldwide box office of almost $160 million. As you mentioned in the opener, written by Eric Heisserer, with characters by Jeffrey Reddick and directed by Stephen Quale. Damon, never say never. It's almost guaranteed when you make a movie called The Final Destination, claiming this is it, we're done. No, you're not. That's every other horror franchise has done this. Maybe they did that on purpose. Maybe the people who produced this were like, when they said the final chapter, it definitely wasn't the final chapter. They went on to make like 7 more movies. That's what we should do so we can make millions of dollars. I'm assuming they're doing this all on their Coke yacht that they stole all the money from The Final Destination, to fund their nefarious things. Here we are, Damon, with yet another sequel to the Final Destination franchise, Final Destination 5.
So it's funny, every time these last 3 movies, every one of those was supposed to be the last one, because when they did Final Destination 3, they said it was going to be a trilogy and that was going to be it. And then it made a bunch of money, and so they said, let's return for the Final Destination. This will be the last one. Then it made even more money, and they're like, well, hold on now. We can come back for Final Destination 5. And so here's my shock here, Patrick, is when we talked to Jeffrey Reddick, the creator and the screenwriter of the original Final Destination film, we mentioned that Final Destination Bloodlines coming out in 2025 is 14 years after Final Destination 5, which again, as I mentioned earlier, came out in 2011. The shocking part to me is that this film, as you mentioned, was on a $40 million budget and it made almost $160 million. I don't know how we didn't get like 8 more of these in a row, because if you know anything about movie studios, and especially when you have a sequelized franchise, they will churn those things out until the last dollar is dropped. Like, they will not stop until they've realized they've absolutely murdered the concept and no one wants to see these anymore. That's what they did with Saw. Like, they just churned out a Saw movie every year for like a decade straight. And to Saw's credit, it still made money, but it didn't even make close to what this one did. This is more than triple the budget. Like, that's like candy to a studio. Like, I don't understand. I'm not saying they should have. This is not exactly the greatest film in the world, but I don't understand how they didn't churn out like 5 more of these. Like, why did they stop? Because I had no idea. As I said earlier, I had definitely not seen 4 and 5. I know I had seen 3. But when we reviewed it, I had no real memory of it. I know I had not seen 4 and 5. Seeing 4 and 5, I'm like, wow, these are not particularly great films, but they still made a boatload of money at the box office. And the fact that they did and they just stopped, it still kind of blows my mind.
That has been the most shocking revelation as we've done this franchise breakdown, is how much money these movies have made. They're wildly successful, and they ended on a high note. I mean, we've talked about this with Nightmare on Elm Street. They actually slashed the budget on Part 3, Dream Warriors, because Part 2 didn't make the money at the box office that they wanted it to. And it was the success of Dream Warriors that got them a bigger budget for 4. And so they were like, oh, great, it's making money again. So let's get in here with 4. They spent more money. They made a bigger, badder movie. And indeed, that one made money. So they go, let's do 5 and let's do 6. Oh, they ran that thing into the ground. They absolutely ran Nightmare on Elm Street into the ground. Then they had to take a long extended break, and eventually they came out with New Nightmare. This is not that case. This was the case of every movie from the first makes more and more and more money, breaks more and more records for this particular franchise. I've never seen a situation like that that I can think of off the top of my head where it was just like every movie was more successful than the last one. I think maybe the box office opening weekend wasn't as strong for Final Destination 5, if I'm not mistaken. It didn't have as big of an opening.
Final Destination 4 made 187 million. This one made about 160. So this one technically made a little less, but for a fifth movie to make that much over the budget is insane.
Still profitable any way you slice it. Let's just say that they spent 40 million making it and another 40 advertising it. It still made double what they spent. Like that's on purely hypotheticals. So you just go, holy shit, like this is wildly successful. This is just a wildly successful franchise. So I was a little bit shocked to see that. Now, you mentioned last time, Damon, that, okay, and need we remind the listeners, the Final Destination 4, that didn't go so well for us. We're not used to reviewing films that are that bad. That's a really bad movie. But you had mentioned, you go, a lot of people have told me Final Destination 5 is a good movie again. Like they course corrected. Damon, it's not that this is a better movie than 4. But 4 was a very, very low bar. And I mean very low bar. I don't think you and I have been that amped up about how bad a movie is in quite some time. Really, probably since Halloween Ends, have we been that irate over how bad a movie is. This is indeed a step up, but Damon, how do I put this gently? Just barely?
I mean, I'll say this. Like, in terms of okay, so I didn't go into this knowing this was also a 3D movie, and as soon as it started, I was like, oh my God, they did 3D again. I had no idea going into it. But I will say, the effects, while not perfect, are far, far better.
Right.
We joked in Final Destination 4, it literally looked like a cartoon at moments. We're like, did they just give up and just hire a cartoonist to draw the animation for these 3D scenes? This one doesn't look like that. Actually, I would say the effects are a lot better. They're not great. They're not amazing. But again, for 2011, we're still in the early infancy of CGI and digital effects getting to where they're at now. As I mentioned, even with the Final Destination, like Iron Man came out in 2013, and that was a really, really incredibly looking film. So this is 2 years prior to that. So again, I don't expect perfection, but it was definitely improved. Where the movie, all these, from 3, 4, and 5, where these movies really fall apart is the script. It really comes down to the story and the execution of the story. Because what we found once you get past part 1 and part 2, and part 2 even to its, I guess, credit and discredit to a certain extent, and not discredit, like when we talked to Jeffrey Reddick, he came up with the story for part 2, and what he had said was he didn't want to just continue the story, he wanted to continue with the mythology. So that's where we got a little bit more of the death design mythology and the idea that new life can stave off death. And that was a kind of a cool little wrinkle, even though we said during that film, they kind of took it like one step too far. But again, It was an interesting wrinkle. Part 3, they introduce a little different mythology. They do it with Bloodworth, and it's not really connected at all to the first 2 films. Part 4 just goes completely off the rails. They don't even mention death's design, really. They just they're like, oh, we're all going to die, and we're all dying still. Like, they just kind of forgot everything about the mythology. And then in part 5, they introduce even more mythology. So the story is really the problem in part 3, part 4, and part 5. It's not even necessarily the execution. And yes, as I said, kind of my complaint, well, not amongst many of part 4, the deaths get so elaborate and ridiculous that you're just like, all right, like this is, I understand you got to be cool and creative and have some misdirection and all. We get all that. But when your death scenes are like 19 minutes long, leading to something, and then that's the misdirection, and then they just fall out a window, that's not really doing a whole lot for me. So they just continue to tack on the mythology for one, and the death scenes just get so ridiculously elaborate that it's just, listen, they're all unbelievable to a certain extent, but at least don't make it so ridiculous that I'm just like, come on.
Yes, Damon, the graphics are improved from Final Destination 4. That's true with Final Destination 5. But you are 100% correct. The issue with these movies is the story. Now, there's an interesting twist to Final Destination 5, which we won't get into just yet. This movie's well over 15 years old, or 10, 12, 13 years old at this point. So we're getting into spoilers throughout the film, throughout the podcast. But I don't want to get to that part of it quite yet. You're still dealing with like the why and how of it all. And boy, does that get tough after 2 films. And this franchise has struggled with the how and the why of it ever since we left the second film. And it really shows on screen. Characters seem confused. And when characters are confused, I get confused. And the only advantage that the audience has is when they go into a Final Destination 3, 4, or 5, is that they know how it works. You and I know the rules. So now you just have to watch the characters and see if they can figure them out. How they go about that depends on whether you're going to end up with a decent Final Destination movie or not. I think 4 and 5 fail at that. They fail at the entertainment value of watching those characters figure out what you already know. You already have superior position over these characters. So how are they going to navigate through this world? Are they going to do it in an interesting way? Which I think they tried desperately. I think earnestly tried in part 3. In part 4, whoa, we were on the funny farm. Like, I don't know what they were doing in part 4. I really don't. Some say that they, they just took all the money and did coke and they didn't actually write a movie. I mean, it's kind of insane. Part 5, they try to get a little bit back more towards characters you care about. We had a real problem with that in 4. They were just hollow. Those characters were barely there. The problem I have, Damon, is that the story of the characters, and the lead character in this one is a guy named Sam, and his ex-girlfriend, Molly. Now, she becomes his ex-girlfriend like in the first instance of the movie. They are at a team building event, and I guess they work for the same company or something. It's pretty foggy. And she basically breaks up with him right there. And he's like, shit, like, we're going to my brother's wedding. Like, you're breaking up with me right now? Oh, fuck. Like, that didn't work. They do this, they're going off this team building exercise, and he has a vision that they're going to fall off a bridge. Okay, we're in. We know how this works. We get it. And then you proceed to have a movie that, in my opinion, Damon, doesn't quite know what it wants to be. We mentioned a name when I was rifling off the cast members. David Koechner. You and I both like David. He's a comedic actor. And I go, well, it's going to be interesting to see him in this movie. These are kind of serious movies. I mean, they take the piss out a little bit, but otherwise they're pretty straightforward. But I was like, he's kind of funny. Then I saw PJ Byrne, a guy I've actually met and hung out with. I met him at Comic-Con, and he worked with MTV, so we were kind of hanging out for a while. I like the guy. I'm biased towards PJ Byrne, just so you know. Another funny guy. I started to realize that part of Final Destination 5 is like an office comedy. And not like a great one, but it's an office comedy in one bit. It's also like a drama, which the characters of Sam and Molly, who have broken up at the beginning of the movie, there's sort of this like B story with them where it's like, are they going to get back together or not? Why does it matter? It will matter to the end of the movie. But while you're navigating through the movie, you really don't give a shit if these two are going to get back together or not. It doesn't really matter. They don't seem like they care. And then the grander problem, Damon, with this movie, and I'd love you to touch on this more, because it will lead us into the end of the movie, the big twist of this movie, if you don't already know the end of this Final Destination 5, is that you've got a group of characters who not only don't know what's going on, they almost don't care what's going on. It's really, really odd to sit through a 90-minute movie where you and I know that death has a design on these folks, but they don't know that. And these folks, they don't know it so much, they don't even give a shit about it. They're like, literally every moment, they are just trying to get back to their normal life. And so it feels inconsequential. I don't know. How did that make you feel this time around? Because I just truly felt like, it's like these characters don't even give a shit that death is coming for them. They see it, that it's happening. They see the coincidence that people are being knocked off who were supposed to die on that bridge. But like at every possible opportunity, they just try to get back to like Sam and Molly's like relationship, or Isaac's, need to bone random chicks. It's like they really are, they try desperately to pull themselves away from that scenario. How did that align with a Damon Martin?
So it's funny, we talk about course correcting with this film from part 4, and one of the biggest criticisms we had of part 4 was, beyond the ridiculous graphics and the CGI and everything, were the ridiculous premonitions in that movie. Like, they were so bad and so overstated, and like it got ridiculous by the end of that movie. Again, when I say course correct, it's almost like, okay, this time we're not going to have any premonitions. Like, we're going to have the original premonition from the bridge, and then we're just not even going to acknowledge it from then on out. And that's kind of what they do. And again, that's a dangerous thing to do in a film like this when the audience already knows the answer. Like, when you like, it's one thing that, like, you can criticize the ridiculous nature of always trying to find new ways to introduce a killer in the Scream films, and they do get a little convoluted at times when it's like, oh yeah, I was Sidney's roommate's cousin's brother's fiance's ex-roommate. What does that make us? Absolutely nothing, to quote the great Dark Helmet from Spaceballs. They go a little outside the lines, but ultimately, as weird as it gets, they always try to connect it to other movies or other characters to make you care about why that killer is the killer. In these movies, in Final Destination, death has a design. That's the entire premise of these films. Someone has a premonition, and then death comes back around to knock off the people who survived when they weren't supposed to survive. As we said, part 3 got a little ridiculous with the whole photo thing where they're figuring out like people and how they're going to die. It got really, really dumb. And then part 4, they just went way over the top with these premonitions and the really bad CGI and the digital effects and everything, trying to show you a premonition. This one, as I said, they don't even really kind of acknowledge it. And then, as you said, they just kind of go on with their average everyday lives. And then when the first girl dies, the gymnast dies, her boyfriend is just angry that his girlfriend died. It's not that death had a design to knock her off. He's just pissed off that his girlfriend died, and so he's just angry at the world. Not angry that death is coming back around for him or his friends. He's just pissed off that his girlfriend died. And so that kind of takes like the center stage in a lot of in the second half of this movie. And then the big return, of course, of Tony Todd. They didn't have Tony Todd in part 3. They didn't have Tony Todd in part 4. They're like, we got to bring back Bloodworth. We got to course correct and bring back a Tony Todd character that everyone loved. And I'm all for that. We love Tony Todd. The late, great Tony Todd. We love him on the show. But then Tony Todd gets introduced. And we're like, okay, here's the half man. Here's the answer. Here's the guy who's going to tell you what you need to know. He kind of does, but then he introduces a whole new mythology. Like, he says to survive, to save a life, you have to take a life, is more or less what he tells him. And when the one character, the kind of dickhead lead character who says, so does that mean, Peter, when he says, if we kill someone, does that mean we save someone? He's like, hey, I don't make the rules. I just clean up the bodies. And I'm just like, okay, so now we went from death has a design. It's going to come back around for all of you, and you survived. You got to figure out a way to avert that, which basically Alex figures out in the first one. If I save you, it skips them and goes on to the next one. So the idea is if you save them a second time, they survive. Now, we, of course, learn that doesn't really matter, but again, neither here nor there. Part 2, they introduce the mythology of if you, a new life can stave off the death of another life that was taken. So that's the whole idea of the baby being born. And again,
we break the cycle. Yeah.
Break the cycle. Okay, cool. Part 3 doesn't even acknowledge it. Part 4 doesn't acknowledge it. Now we're back to part 5. And now we've gotten to the point where like, hey, if you go murder someone and take their life, death will be like, cool, we're even. It's just, it gets wacky. And as you said, they don't even really acknowledge it.
It's really interesting because I felt like I said in part 3, they had that one goth character who gets pissed when I think his girlfriend's name was Erin. When she dies, he kind of decides like, well, I'm just going to go after them. But it happens so late in the movie that it almost just like kind of gets brushed away pretty quickly at the end. And I was like, man, if they'd explored that more, that could be interesting. They do that here with the Peter character. From about the moment they meet Bloodworth, which is about halfway through the movie, you start to see his turn. It's not a terribly interesting turn. I'm going to be harsh when I say that. But you clearly see like, he's like, huh. So all I got to do is kill the right people and I'll live. Got it. That's good. Okay, I can work with that. And he kind of spreads that around and it kind of gets into their heads. But again, like we're saying, they're just trying to go about their normal lives. So it's rather inconsequential. But hey, they explored it, and that was something I think we needed to be explored. Another thing I said was you need Bloodworth back. Bloodworth came back in this one. Cool. The problem was when that interaction took place, our lead guy here, Sam, like he didn't even really think of his vision. He's just like, I don't know, I just kind of saw something. I don't know. That's kind of weird. It was weird. That's all best I can tell you. Alex in the original was like rabid. He's like, I know something's wrong. He was so sure about it. So he had this kind of confidence in what he thought was going on. Sam was kind of waving it off. So when they meet Bloodworth, they're like, hey man, we're just trying to go about our regular lives. What do you mean by all this death stuff? And he goes, well, he starts to wax poetic about it all. And they're just like, oh, okay. Like they don't really give a shit. They're like that Pete Davidson character on SNL. Like, oh, okay. Like they don't give a shit. The only one that it perks the ears is Peter, and he gets the totally wrong message out of it. And then the other thing I said was that, what's really missing from part 4 is that there's no cop going, what the fuck is going on with all of you guys? That's completely missing. Well, he's back. They brought the cop back in the form of Agent Block, played by the great Courtney B. Vance, phenomenal actor. When I saw his name in the credits, I go, well, whatever he's doing will be good. And indeed, he was this federal agent who was just like, it's really weird that all of you are where the deaths are happening. And then he'd sit down and have conversations with them. And it almost played a little too real. It played so real because he was just like, so what is it? And they're like, I don't know. I just had these visions. That's the best I can tell you. And he's like, yeah, I guess that's as good as it's going to get. Like, it was just so like, it was defeated before it ever got off the start. It was so odd, like how this really worked. But it all, Damon, and I think it rolls right into what is ultimately what this movie coalesces into, and that is its ending. Now, ultimately, Peter is on this rampage, and he insists that we need to take lives to save them. And then they ultimately take Peter's life. He tries to kill them, and they have to kill him in the process to stop. So they stop the life.
And don't forget, he kills Agent Block. He shoots Agent Block in the back, so he's already killed someone.
Yeah. Yeah, he killed Agent Block. They have to kill him because he wants to kill them because they saw what he did. And so they're like, I think we're okay. Oh, because the gun goes off and it goes right towards Sam and misses him. So he's like, I think we're good. This is about the third time in the movie where they go, I think we're good. And they just want to move on with their lives. That's indeed what they do. Now, there is a little thing that we have been omitting this entire time, which is they keep talking, that is Sam and his ex-girlfriend Molly, about this potential job offer in Paris. And I go, boy, that's tying into the first one. That's weird. What's that all about? Well, once the movie finally gets through itself, they get back together. Thank God. I couldn't wait, Damon, for those two to get back together. They were lighting up the screen with their romance. They get back together and they fly to Paris. Or at least you think they're going to fly to Paris. They get on flight 180. And on flight 180, there is a commotion. Who is it? It's Alex and his gang. This turns out that Final Destination 5 is a prequel to the Final Destination series. So all the shit that we had to go through was to justify the fact that this movie is a prequel. Okay, fine. I like the twist. It's interesting. I didn't know it was coming because I've never seen this movie, and I've managed to avoid spoilers for Final Destination 5 for the last 14 years. It still didn't make an enjoying movie experience because of how nonchalant and lackadaisical and confused thematically this movie is. Even though the payoff is like, oh, that's cool. They broke Death's design and it came back for them on Flight 180. Cool. And then that it turned into a ripple effect for the rest of the series. Got it. It still didn't make Final Destination 5 a fun watch.
So let me just backtrack. You talk about how this movie doesn't quite know what it wants to be. The greatest example of that is Peter killing the cop, and in his mind, he just took a life, so he should be okay. But then it turns into like a full-on like murder, like a full-on like serial killer movie because he's like, oh, you witnessed me kill the cop, so I gotta kill you too. Like now,
and then it turns into like a John Wick. Now it's a John Wick movie. They're having an action fight in the kitchen. It's insane.
Now it's not even a Final Destination movie. Now it's like we gotta cover up my crime. So like I was like, what is going on here? Okay, so yeah. Now let me say again, to your point and to your credit, I had no idea what this movie was about. Same thing, avoided spoilers for 14 years. I honestly didn't know where this movie was going, but I will tell you, my little movie writer brain, as soon as, is it Sam? Is that his name, Sam?
Yeah, Sam.
As soon as he said he had an internship or an apprenticeship, he's a chef. He had this apprenticeship opportunity in Paris. I was like, this somehow ties back in the first one. Now,
of course.
Maybe that's me, because again, I kind of look for those kind of things, but I almost feel like he should have said I have an apprenticeship and it's required me to travel far or something. Like as soon as he said Paris,
go to Europe or whatever. Yeah.
As soon as he said Paris, I know where this is going. I don't know how it's going to tie in. I didn't know it was a prequel. I will say that I didn't figure out it was a prequel, but I knew something was going to go on with like the whole Paris thing. So that was first. I was like, okay, this is something to do with the first film. Now I will say, the big twist of it being a prequel and they end up on Flight 180 and you see that brief flash of Alex and his friends getting tossed off the plane. Okay, that was kind of cool. Like even though, but then you have to start wrapping your head around the rest of the movie. And that's where it all fucks up because you're like, okay, so now Bloodworth has told them a different thing about Death's design, yet he doesn't tell that to Alex and his friend, like, a month later or 3 weeks later or whatever. This is the problem when you try to write a twist and it's never been intended. It kind of feels like a show that I absolutely adore, and I do still love it, but it kind of feels a little bit like Lost to me. Because when Lost started, they had a premise of a plane crash and survivors on a mysterious island and some kind of weird sound creature, and they really didn't know where they were going to go. They didn't. If you go back and listen to interviews when you listen to J.J. Abrams and Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse, they really had no idea where the story was going to evolve. And so that's why when they got to the end of the series, people were like, well, we need to know where this came from, what this was. And they're just like, we really had no idea. We just kind of played with it as we went along. Now, again, I still really like Lost, but I appreciate when a show has an end goal in line. Like we always knew what the final shot was going to be. We didn't know exactly how we were going to get there, but we knew what the final scene was going to be. And I'm not saying you have to have an entire thesis of a movie to say, a 5 series or a 6 series movie or whatever it is to know. But when you start introducing new shit like this, while again, I will say it was kind of a cool concept, the fact that Flight 180 blows up, it kills Sam and Molly, okay, again, nice tie-in to the first film. But the Bloodworth thing fucks it all up again because 2 weeks later when he meets Alex and Clear, he doesn't say shit. He doesn't, if he's like this all-knowing, all-seeing being, then he doesn't tell them the same information he just told the last people. So, yeah, like, it's a cool concept if you actually had it planned better. And if all they had to do in my little rewrite of Living Dead even though it's a little boring and not as exciting and doesn't
Okay,
introduce
this movie is a little boring and not exciting, Damon. So that's on brand. Go ahead.
just have Bloodworth tell them basically the same thing he tells Alex. That's all you have to do. He's not introducing new shit. He introduces new shit in this movie and then doesn't tell it to Alex and his friends a week later.
Damon, I got thoughts on that, but I'm going to save that for categories. Do you think it's category time, or do you have any other things to muse about this movie? Because I think ultimately my big takeaway is that leading up to the reveal, which is a great reveal, and I don't mind it at all, leading up to that reveal, this movie's kind of a thematic mess. It doesn't know what its ultimate themes are. Like, I would argue there's way more strong themes in the third one, which I thought was already hanging on by a thread. I don't even know what the hell these characters now care about. If you've noticed me and Damon struggling to remember the main character's name, there's a good reason. He is basically paper. He is blank paper in this movie. He's barely a factor in this movie. Almost everybody else is more of a factor than he is, and he's our lead. This movie's dry but tries to be funny, and I think it's very imbalanced, and it's trying to give a lot of moments to all the characters, but none of them are very coherent. Is it an upgrade from the Final Destination? Yes. Is it a big upgrade? No, not close.
I want to make one comment before we get to categories, and that goes back to your what you said about this movie tries to be funny and it's not particularly funny. I wrote a review, and you can read it over on rewindofthelivingdead.com, a new movie that came out called Borderline, starring Samara Weaving, who is one of my absolute favorite actors, one of my favorite scream queens. I love her. And her husband actually wrote and directed the movie. And it's a movie about a pop star who gets stalked by kind of a loony guy who's like convinced that they're meant to be together. And it's written as like a horror romantic comedy. And literally on the poster, it says a romantic comedy thriller like you've never seen before, something to that effect. Now, if you go read my review, I say that like the premise of the movie is better than the execution, but the problem is that it's posing itself as a comedy and it's not really funny. If they would have leaned more into the thrilling aspects, like there were some really decent thrilling aspects. There was a couple unhinged characters where there were some actually pretty harrowing moments, but it's almost like the writer and director was like, I got to make this a funny movie. And the comedy just never really worked. Like, it got goofy at moments, and there were a couple funny moments, but for what is posed as a comedy, that's like, when I go see The Hangover, I want to laugh. It needs to be funny. Now, there's plenty of comedies that other people find funny that I don't find funny. That's just a taste thing. That's not really it's not funny. It's just not funny to me. But that movie was not really funny, and I was like, man, if you would have just leaned more into the horror and thriller elements, it actually probably could have worked as a movie, but you tried so hard to turn this into the comedy, and it wasn't funny. Final Destination 5 suffers from the same problem. You mentioned David Koechner and PJ Byrne. PJ Byrne, I adore PJ Byrne. I love him and everything he's done, from Horrible Bosses to The Boys and everything in between. And David Koechner, you mentioned, of course, Whammy from the great.
Whammy.
Yeah, I think you and I should go out sometime, have some chicken, maybe some sex, see what happens. Two great comedic actors, and again, you do see them try to introduce some there's a couple of comedic moments that do kind of work, but that's not this movie. Like, that's not the point of this movie, so it's it suffers from the same malaise. It's like, why are we trying to make it funny when it's not really funny? So I had to mention that because you mentioned earlier the comedic characters, and like they just feel out of place, and the jokes don't really work, and then when it doesn't work, it just doesn't make the movie move forward. So I had to mention that because I was like, what are we doing here?
It doesn't advance the thematic engine of Final Destination. It actually just slows it down. So yeah,
and I'm all for serious. We talked about this with Seven. Seven is a very serious, dark movie, but it's also freaking hilarious at moments.
Oh my God.
There's some really laugh out loud moments in Seven. You can do it. It can be done, but you just got to find the right moments. Like, they've leaned too hard into that with Marvel lately. Marvel actually had some pretty funny moments in superhero movies, but then they're like, people really like those funny moments. Let's just go Thor: Love and Thunder, which got fucking stupid, like just stupid. There's a balancing act, I guess is what I'm getting at here. You can make it like there's funny moments in Scream, the original Scream. There's some legitimately funny moments in that. But just pick and choose your moments and actually make sure the dialogue or what you're doing is funny. Final Destination 5 isn't funny.
Yeah, it was like it took breaks from the story to be an office comedy. Yeah. Like it really does. And it's like, no. Like listen, there probably isn't a more serious movie than Seven in terms of movies that we've reviewed. And it knows just the moment to sprinkle in the comedy. I mean, it's just a drop. But it comes at just the right time. It's also a police procedural. Talk about a movie that's balancing a few different things. It's a horror movie. It's a police procedural. It's a mystery movie. You know, there's a touch of romance and melancholy in it. And there's just a sprinkling of humor in just the right moments. Now that's David Fincher, one of the top directors of all time. So he can balance all those things just right. This movie was like, no, let's take full on breaks to be funny. Let's just go and do office comedy for a little bit. And you're like, this isn't like Saturday Night Live. Like, we don't need to like do this thing over here and do this thing over there. I need a through line. I need some cohesion. And so I think a lot of people were just glamored by the fact that this wasn't Final Destination 4. And they were like, no, this movie's great. And I'm like, maybe compared to that, but compared to dog shit, cat shit's not bad because it's smaller. It's like, they're both still shit. Sorry, I know I'm like, two times in a row, we're kind of trashing movies and we don't like to do that. We genuinely try not to do that on this show, but this is not a good movie. It's not. Like, we have two movies in a row that I think are flat out not good movies, like not movies I would recommend you watch.
And it's funny, I mentioned if you didn't hear the intro, you skipped to the intro, which I get. I understand. Or you watch this on YouTube where I don't put the intro. I just get right into the podcast episode. The guy who wrote this, and I'm not trying to like just chuck him under the bus, but Eric Heiser. His only other movie credit before this was he wrote the Nightmare on Elm Street remake in 2010. When I saw that, I was like, oh, this all makes sense. Now he's continued to work in horror, and he's written a lot of other horror stuff since then. But when I saw his other movie credit was Nightmare on Elm Street remake, and then this, I was like, oh, okay, now I totally get it, because the Nightmare on Elm Street remake is an absolute utter train wreck.
Oh, maybe that's the worst movie we've ever reviewed. I'm not sure. There's a few contenders. They're high up there, but Nightmare on Elm Street remake is one of the highest contenders. It is no question a top 3 worst movie we have ever talked about on this podcast, and just so happens to be the same writer. So I was like, I don't think he's making Damon's MVP this week.
Yeah, I don't think he is. Sorry to tell you. With that said, Patrick, let's get into categories. And I will say, the categories were a lot easier this time than they were from Destination 4.
Oh, yeah.
So let's kick things off as we do every week with best performance. So, and by the way, I got to mention this. Again, I had never seen this before. When the movie started, I didn't look it up, didn't look anything up about it. I literally had no idea. I pressed play, I watched it on Max, and I was like, okay, let's go. I was like, damn, when I saw the credits, I was like, this has actually got like named actors, like good named actors. I mean, I'm not saying like David Koechner's won awards or anything, but I was like, I know him. PJ Byrne, I know him. Obviously Courtney B. Vance, a great actor. I was like, okay, maybe we're going to step up our game here. So, Patrick, for Final Destination 5, who gets your best performance?
My best performance goes to Courtney B. Vance, as you mentioned, who plays Agent Block. Now, I knew right away when I saw his name in the credits, I go, oh, he's going to be good. Whatever it is, it's Courtney B. Vance. He's a very good actor. I really enjoyed him in American Crime Story, where he played... I won't even try to remember the lawyer's name, the one who defended O.J. Simpson.
Johnny Cochran. Johnny Cochran, yeah. If it doesn't fit, you must have quit. Yeah, go on.
His portrayal of Johnny Cochran is legendary. It's incredible. If you have not seen that show, I think it's the best thing Ryan Murphy's ever done. And it's large in part to Courtney B. Vance's contributions. No different here. Courtney B. Vance... And I don't mean this is elevated horror. I just mean he elevated this movie. He came in, he did his job. You brought up Thor: Love and Thunder. And I always think of Christian Bale. Christian Bale literally just off to the side going, Go ahead and make your movie. I'll do my part. Like, my part is to act really well. So I'll do that. You go make your movie. And I feel like that's what Courtney B. Vance did here, playing this agent who's on the trail of whatever is killing off these people that should not be dying. This is more than a coincidence. He knows it. He trusts that. He trusts his gut. And he takes the role seriously. If you wanted to, I guess, like set some sort of a precedent for tonally how I would have played this movie if I were to rewrite a Living Dead this movie, I'd go, we're going to take Courtney B. Vance's performance, we're going to chop it all out of this movie, and we're going to make a new movie around it. He was that level of good. And so my best performance this time around had to go to him because he was the one person in this movie that was truly, I think, taking it serious and wanted it to be the best possible movie it could be.
And I have no idea why I'm mentioning this just because it popped in my head, but Courtney B. Vance is married to the great Angela Bassett, which I learned a few years ago. I was like, oh, they've been
Damn, so he's winning on all fronts.
He's winning in every part of life. Yeah, they've been married for decades. So, yeah, I was like, hey, way to go to Courtney B. Vance. Listen, I love him, and I love him and everything he's done. And as I said, as soon as I saw his name, I was like, damn, they got Courtney B. Vance. Again, this is, before he really became like a well-known named actor, but still, again, you saw the talent that was there early on. We mentioned that with Mary Elizabeth Winstead in part 3, where like she wasn't a known actor. Now she's a very well-known actor, an award-winning actor, and incredible. But you kind of see the early bits of that in Final Destination 3, and I think you see that again in this one with Courtney B. Vance. For me, my best performance. There were a couple rough moments in here, but I do want to give credit where credit's due. To an actor, and the reason I say this is because I never heard of them before. This is not like I'm not knocking them. I just never heard them before. But I appreciated, it just sounds terrible. I appreciated the kind of, we talk about like a lot of these characters are paper thin. I kind of appreciated Jacqueline McInnes Wood's Olivia. She was the alternative, kind of ditzy, like just kind of horny character in a way. And even though she was puddle deep as far as a character goes, she played the part really well. And I kind of appreciate, like, if I'm going to get these kind of paper thin characters, you're not going to give me a whole lot to grab onto. At least she kind of played that part to perfection in a way. Like as soon as we introduce her in the movie, she's like getting out of a serial killer van, by the way, like just she gets out of the van and you can tell she's like, she just had like a, one night stand with this Australian rock dude or whatever. And she's just like, she's very confident and she kind of tells she just doesn't give a fuck. And she kind of immediately has a combative relationship with the one other girl that's working at this company. And I just kind of appreciate, like, if you're going to give me a one-note character, at least give me a good one-note character. And I thought she did a good performance for what was ultimately kind of a one-note character.
I'm glad you brought this up because it was one of the things that now I realize I'm taking umbrage with the Final Destination series because of this. Its portrayal of alt characters has got me heated. Damon, I'm a goth boy. You know that. Damon, and if you know Damon Martin, he wears black t-shirt. He's got cool coiffed hair, and he's covered in tattoos. The man's an alt man. Okay, this is who we are. We're part of the darker side of society. But truth be told, those people tend to be pretty nice, tend to be pretty normal for the most part. But in Final Destination, those people always seem scary. It's so weird. I don't like how it's portrayed particularly, and just like her getting out of that van first thing in the morning and like adjusting her skirt and all. It's just saying like, oh, that's what those people do. And I'm like, fuck whoever writes these things thinking that's what our lives are like. That said, I did have just a very ooky night the other night. I was texting you videos from my goth night the other night, but we're good people is all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying to the producers of Final Destination is whoever's in Bloodlines, don't make the tattooed eyeliner, dark black dyed hair people the scary people in your movie. We're teddy bears. Just leave us be.
Let's see. Part 2 had the coked out rocker in the Trans Am.
That's right.
And then part 3 had the goth guy and goth girl who worked at Home Depot. Part 4 didn't really have the part 4 alternative person was the racist driving around listening to metal music with a Nazi symbol on his arm. We're like, what are you doing? And then this one, of course, introduces. But even that, like, Olivia isn't totally like a goth. She just has that goth moment at the beginning with the.
She's like goth on the weekends, you know,
She's
like,
like
and then
goth
she
adjacent.
buttons, yeah, and she buttons up for work. Which another thing is like, no, I know plenty of corporate goths. I like to consider myself one as well.
Yeah, no, you're right. They don't do a whole lot of justice to the goth and alternative community. And I'll tell you what, man, you put me in that office setting where I think they work for a paper company. I think is what they actually do.
Who knew? They never got into anything in this.
I would be far more uncomfortable in that setting if you dumped me in like a metal concert with like I'm surrounded by a bunch of metalheads. So I'm just saying, like I'd be much more comfortable around the goth tattooed people. Patrick, let's talk about MVP, the most valuable person in this movie, named after great character actor Ken Foree from the movie From Beyond, when he jumped down a flight of stairs and into a basement to kill a creature wearing nothing more that's on bikini. If that's not an MVP performance, I don't know what is. So, Patrick, when it came to Final Destination 5, or, by the way, did you hear the original name for this movie?
Oh, do tell.
Final Destination. It was the number 5 at the beginning. It was
boy, I'm really glad that didn't go through, because I wouldn't be calling it that right now.
5-0 Destination. I don't know what they were going for. I'm glad they changed the title of that. Patrick, who gets your MVP?
My MVP goes to the late great Tony Todd as Bloodworth. This movie just needed his swagger. It needed his mystery. It needed all that he can bring to a movie. Even though, and we'll get to that in a few moments here, his messaging was inconsistent, it was great to have him back. I mean, when I say he was sorely missed in part 3, he was. I think he was literally the missing piece of part 3. Part 4, I'm glad he wasn't part of, because I don't want his name sullied with that terrible movie. So to see him back here, I was like, yep, that's what this movie needed, and we got it. I mean, I could have easily said Courtney B. Vance also, because he's also that missing piece that was missing from this movie in particular. We got them both, so they both get my top honors.
And I know we're going to talk about this, but I just got to say, by the way, I mentioned like the convoluted storytelling of like what Bloodworth knows in this one now is a prequel and then going in the next one. In this movie, he's the coroner. In the next one, he works as the undertaker in a funeral parlor. So he switched jobs really fucking quick because he's actually wearing a coroner. He's actually wearing a coroner's jacket in this one, and in the next one, he's actually working as like the mortician in a funeral home. And it's like, again, because this is a prequel, it's literally like 2 weeks later or whatever. So I'm just saying he switches jobs really quick. For me, listen, we talked about this going back to part 3, and you said, it's funny, go back and listen to part 3. We talk about the weird, kooky character that I was so glad died in part 3, and you said, we've moved beyond these creepy, pervy characters. I'm so glad we moved beyond that. And then part 4 has one, and part 5 definitely has one. But I'm not giving it to the character necessarily. I'm giving my MVP to PJ Byrne, because while his character is incredibly problematic and weird, I love him as an actor, and he's got great comedic timing, and PJ Byrne is the perfect example of that guy. He's never the lead guy. He's never the first guy on the call sheet. He's usually like the 5th guy on the call sheet. But everything that he's in, he elevates. Now, again, while his character is incredibly problematic in this movie,
oh my goodness,
the only comedic beats that work are PJ Byrne. And the only character that actually kind of gives you depth, as weird as that sounds, is PJ Byrne. You understand who this character is and what he's after. It's a very simple thing he's after, but you understand this character right from the offset. And again, I go back to Horrible Bosses, which he's in that movie for maybe 10 minutes. Hilarious. Like, I love Horrible Bosses. That movie cracks me up. He's great in that movie. I mentioned he's in The Boys. He's great in The Boys. Like, he elevates he's phenomenal in The Wolf of Wall Street. I love him in with Nikki Koskov. They call him Rugrat. I love him in that movie. He elevates everything he's in, even if he's like the 5th or 6th guy in the call sheet. So again, his character's problematic, but I love PJ Byrne. When I saw he was in this movie, I was immediately like, well, this movie may still not be great, and Patrick, spoiler, it's not great. Having him elevated the movie.
He is part of that dying breed of proper character actors. That's really what PJ Byrne's doing. Now they're still all over like network television. You can spot a character actor a mile. You throw a rock and you hit 10. But in movies, the character actor is dying out. PJ Byrne is still a guy who can do that. He's 8th on the call sheet. He's 10th on the call sheet, but he comes in and he sprinkles in that little accent that makes the movie that much more fun. Weirdly enough, he's in a movie with David Koechner, who's fantastically funny, who is a natural wit. I don't know why they hamstrung that character to be less funny. I think maybe they thought some of his character was funny, but the way they wrote him didn't really work out. David did what he did. He cashed his paycheck. I ain't going to hate the guy for that. But PJ's character, those were moments where you were like, well, that is kind of funny. Like, whatever he's doing is kind of funny. It's terribly inappropriate, but it's funny nonetheless. So he's even outshining the comedian that's in the movie, because character actors, that's their skill. Their skill is, you need me to be that guy, I'll be that guy for you. It's a wonderful aspect of the business that isn't appreciated enough. So fair enough to give him MVP this time around.
So, Patrick, let's move on to our next category, and that is Best Line. Now, we haven't really done this before, even though the first and second Final Destination we have pretty much widely agreed upon are the best two of this franchise. Sorry for our eventual franchise review where we rank these movies. I'll give you a spoiler. Part 5 is not going to be number 1 for me. But this movie did have some dialogue. Let's just say that.
It had dialogue.
So, Patrick, what do you want to tease your best line to set up for Final Destination 5?
Damon, my best line comes from your best performance, Olivia, our alt girl. And this is very early in the movie, and I was just like, oh, that's what this movie's going to be like. And then I text you and I go, Damon, we're doing best line. Because this is one of those movies that, whether it's funny or not, they are trying to get you to laugh. They're trying to get a rise out of you. I'm not saying that this moment that's coming up is funny. I just went, this doesn't fit in this movie or any other movie ever. Like, this is just a line.
If you want to get rid of...
Sorry, I played it early. Let me play it again. Sorry about that. I played it again. Hold on one second. Here we go.
If you want to get rid of that baby fat, you should try the gym. They have these workout machines that you use on your back. You're good at that.
Sweetie, it's not fat. They're called tits.
Can I say we moved in, we talked about like problematic characters, and we moved into an area where body shaming is shunned, and I, as a chubby dude, I appreciate that we don't just openly shun, we don't openly just insult people for having different bodies than everybody else. I've never seen Eric Heiser. I'm sorry if I'm butchering his name. And I understand he's trying to be funny. The interaction between the two characters, they're meant to be combative, kind of intern, early, young executive type character, whatever you want to say, young salespeople, whatever it is in this movie. I understand the one character is supposed to be a gymnast. Okay, we know gymnasts are very fit and thin. I understand it's part of the job. But to say this girl has baby fat, I was like, are we looking at the same person? Like, I understand we've moved beyond that, but I'm like, when she's like, you got a little baby fat there. I'm like, what? Are we looking at, do you need glasses? Like, who the fuck are you looking at right now that you're calling and saying she has baby fat? What the fuck are you talking about?
The character of Olivia could be a stunt double for Megan Fox. I mean, when I say the woman's fit, she's incredibly fit. And she's standing next to a gymnast, two fit people. And I guess how Eric saw this was like, oh, they're so competitive that the gymnast considers her out of shape. But that, like, it's just like, what a stupid line. It's such a stupid line. I should have called it stupidest line, because that's what it was. But it just stood out to me, and I was like, oh, that's what we're doing in this movie. We're coming up with really dumb ideas like this. So let's celebrate them.
Like, I don't want to be superficial, but I'll be superficial for a second. I looked at Olivia, I was like, who are you looking at right now? Are you like blind? Yeah. Like, this woman is incredibly attractive and baby fat. What the fuck are you talking about?
Baby fat? Was she talking about me standing in the background? Like, where's the baby fat?
Yeah, like, was it me at the lunch table? Because that's probably where I would have been in this scene. Like, where are we at?
Me and Damon at the craft services table is what she was talking about.
Yeah, what are you talking about right now? So now my line is clearly, once again, very problematic, but it's very PJ Byrne. But I will say, listen, we all understand, we've course corrected a lot in life and we are more considerate and things like that. But listen, I'm not going to lie and say that I don't still laugh at inappropriate humor. One of my favorite all-time comedies, which is you should never make this movie in 2025. But when I watch it, I still love it because I grew up with, that's a movie called Revenge of the Nerds. When you watch Revenge of the Nerds, that movie has so many red flags. Whew. But if you grew up in that era, in the 80s and 90s, you can watch it. It is funny. I still love that movie. It is a really, really poorly choice. Like, there's so many bad choices made in that movie. But I can still laugh my ass off at Revenge of the Nerds. And you could say that you can watch, Vacation. You can go down the line. There's a lot of movies. Yeah, lots of those. Porky's. I mean, there's just tons of them. But I'm not going to lie and say that sometimes inappropriate humor doesn't make me laugh. We're all guilty of that, and I'm not going to apologize for it. And there was a great line when PJ Byrne is getting a massage, and it just made me laugh because I was like, yeah, this is, unlike the baby fat line, which made zero sense, this one actually did fit the character.
Wait. Are those things even sterilized? No. I'm not catching any diseases unless I've earned them.
Not catching any diseases unless I've earned them. It reminds me of that line from Succession when Tom is talking, I can't remember who he's talking to, and he says something about somebody getting syphilis, and he's like, syphilis, that's kind of like the MySpace of STDs. You don't hear about it anymore.
Now that's clever humor. That's funny stuff. If you're sitting back going, Damon and Patrick picked those as best lines, they've really lost their minds. Best lines used to be something around here. It's just to prove the point of the kind of movie we're dealing with, where these lines are utterly ridiculous, and they thought somehow they fit into this movie. I promise you they don't. These are what their attempts at humor looked like.
Yeah, it was not good. Patrick, let's talk about best death. This is a Final Destination movie. We got to have a best death in here. So, Patrick, who gets your best death?
My best death actually goes to Isaac, who we are raving about in the categories, in the spa, in fact, right before he earns his next disease, which will be no longer breathing. And what really sold me about this was it was, again, like all the other deaths, like a long buildup, and you're trying to figure out what is the thing in the room that's going to kill him. Well, during this spa treatment, they decide to put in acupuncture needles, and I've done acupuncture. I don't know if you have. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world. I'm not scared of needles. I'm covered in tattoos. It's just not a comfortable process. But in the chaos of it all, and when death finally comes for him, he is flipped off of the table and he goes face down on top of all those needles that were in him. And because I know what it feels like to have those needles in me, the thought of him slamming face down onto the ground with those needles going into his body, they do not kill him. He kind of gets up and struggles to pull them out. I was like, I feel this in this moment. Ultimately, I feel what's going on here. And then he doesn't get, they set it up like he's about to be burned to death. The fire only comes up to him and he kind of cowers against the wall and he's like, oh my God, cool, I'm out of here. And then a Buddha statue falls down and splatters his head like a watermelon on the pavement. And so I was like, you know what? As ridiculous as this is, it's a fitting death for PJ. And that little bit of needle on top of it all, and the subversion with the head smash at the end, that's a bit of a chef's kiss for me.
The needles, if they would have just had a needle just somehow shoot through his eye and go into his brain or something, I would have been cool with that. But I mentioned part of my problem amongst many of Final Destination 4 is how elaborate the death scenes got. And I joked, I said, every single death scene has to involve water and something falling. Every single one. And this one was like the trifecta because water spilled on something electric and started the fire, alcohol spilled on the ground, and then the Buddha thing falls down and crushes his head. This is like everything that could fall or get wet had to get sandwiched into this one scene. You're not wrong. It was a cool scene, but I was just like, my God, like this is like everything I've talked about of like just going wrong in the Final Destination universe happening in one scene. Now, my best death, I cheated a little bit because I actually went back to The Premonition, but it was something I had not seen before in a Final Destination film, and I was like, okay, that was pretty gnarly. during the premonition of the bridge collapse, when the character Sam is having like visions of everyone dying and how they're dying, there's a couple of them, Olivia falls off and then a car comes out and crushes her. But my favorite was David Koechner's character, Dennis, the lead guy, the manager of the whole place. He falls and slides to the edge of the bridge, and they're getting ready to go over and save him, and somehow, I don't know why there's boiling oil in a trucker.
There was hot tar, Damon.
Hot tar. That's what I'm sorry.
Yeah,
hot tar.
They're patching the roads.
Hot tar was in there and it spills over and it literally falls on him and burns his skin away. And I was like, that was pretty cool and creative. I will give them credit for that. It kind of reminded me of like, you've seen, if you ever watched a movie with tar and feathering, it's pretty freaking brutal. Something they did back in like the medieval times. It was kind of like that. It kind of reminded me a little of the scene from Game of Thrones where the one Targaryen brother has the gold dumped on his head by Khal Drogo, and you just see his face just melt away. It was kind of like that. Just a splash of tar, and you see David Koechner's entire skin just come off. I was like, all right, that was pretty cool.
It was a pretty good death. That almost made my top death. It was really good. I do want to give an honorable mention too to Olivia's death, not necessarily for the death part of it, because ultimately she just ends up falling out of a window, but she's hooked up to this like eye laser, I think she's doing LASIK surgery or something.
Yeah.
And like the whole sequence is actually probably the most harrowing sequence in the movie, because they first like show on camera the guy clipping her eye open, which is very intense. Like they don't cut away, and they sort of show the process of how this like metal clip like gets under her eyelid to hold it open while they do the laser treatment. And you're just like, Jesus, like that alone was pretty intense. And then you feel the vulnerability of her eyeball being exposed, and then there's this laser, and you know what's going to happen. There's water, there's a short circuit, and then the laser goes haywire. That laser doesn't kill her, but when it zaps her eye like that, I was like, oh, that's actually pretty intense. Like that was one of the better ones. But just the death itself, I had to rescind the award because she ends up just going crazy and falling out the window. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not interesting.
And I think that kind of speaks back to why I loved the David Koechner death, the Dennis death, is because less is more. And I said this before, as they continue to get these death scenes more and more elaborate, adding in, again, it's like the most ridiculous dominoes have to fall to lead to these deaths, even with Olivia's, which I agree, that scene with the LASIK surgery is pretty intense. I don't have, I know a lot of people, the reason they don't wear contacts is because they have a fear of putting their finger in their eye. I wear glasses by choice. I don't really care about that. I don't have, a phobia of putting my finger in my eye. I just don't particularly I tried to wear contacts, just don't particularly enjoy it. And the upkeep is just a pain in the ass. That's a whole other subject. But the eye thing doesn't bother me. Some people watch that. That's a really intense scene because people just really freak out at you touching their eye. But then to cheat it, and again, you have the liquid falling and the malfunction, and once again, the really elaborate death. But then for her to just fall out of a window, I was like, that just feels kind of cheap. But like I said, that's why I like the David Koechner. He just gets boiled over by a bunch of tar. And I was like, all right. I know it's not elaborate, but that's pretty fucking cool. And that's why I said, these death scenes, and I mentioned it, again, going back to the intro, and for people who didn't hear the intro, the writer actually said, it was kind of harrowing to write this movie because you have to write in these elaborate death scenes. He said it got a little hard and actually made challenges. And I'm like, that's part of the problem as we've continued with this franchise is they feel like they have to get so elaborate. And I'm just like, simplicity works sometimes, guys. Just getting a guy spilled boiling tar and his face melts off, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, sometimes you don't need to go that crazy.
Yeah, you don't need a LASIK and then falling out of a window or water and falling and a Buddha statue fall. Oh my God, just how many different things can we get wet and fall in this movie? Patrick, our next category is actually looking ahead because this is actually our last Final Destination episode prior to the new movie coming out. Final Destination Bloodlines comes out in May. We will, of course, review that, and then we will wrap up, as we always do with our franchise, as a full franchise review episode where we look back, rank the movies, all that kind of good stuff, and kind of give our favorite categories for the entire franchise. But Final Destination Bloodlines is coming out in May. There is a trailer out there. There's a teaser trailer, and we did, of course, talk to Jeffrey Reddick about this during our interview, and you can, of course, find that on our YouTube page or just on the podcast page to listen to that interview. 14 years later, what have we learned? What are we hoping for in Final Destination Bloodlines?
For me, it's two key things, Damon. Number one, death needs to become a character again. The problem with movies outside of the first two, the movies outside of the first two, is that the deaths start to feel more and more like coincidence. It was very rampant here. Everything just felt like an accident. Nothing really felt like death was coming for them. The insidiousness, the maliciousness, it was gone. It really did just feel like, I think the wind blew, and then it started a little process of things that are going to get to me. In the original movie, you have a strong feeling that death is choosing you. You have a strong feeling that death is punishing you for messing with its design. That is missing from the last three movies in this franchise. That it desperately needs to come back. And that leads right to my next point, Damon. And we took umbrage with the character of Bloodworth's sort of inconsistent messaging. I'm just putting this out there. The reason he, I would say, misdirects the characters in Final Destination 5 is because Bloodworth is indeed death personified. You asked, why is he in a coroner's jacket? And the next one, he's at the morgue. He's a totally different guy. What's that all about? He's at a funeral home. Why was he one guy and the other? Because he is death. That's why. And I hope that reveal, and we know that Tony Todd completed his filming before he passed away, unfortunately. But he completed his story. I'm hoping that what we learn in Bloodlines is that indeed this was his plan all along, and he was just toying with these people. By the way, that's the only way it's going to make sense why he misdirected the original group and then redirected the next group. That's got to be why, right? Please, someone make sense of why Bloodworth exists in this timeline.
So I agree with you in principle. The only downside is that obviously, and this is very sad, of course, Tony Todd is no longer with us. It sucks that you waited till now to do that, because obviously if he is introduced as like the hand of death, maybe not even death, just like he's like the one facilitating it. Yeah, like he's the archangel of death. Sadly, Tony Todd is no longer with us, and we know this movie makes a bunch of money. They're not going to stop. They're going to make a sequel, and he can't come back, and that's kind of a bummer because he's the through line. So here's my suggestion, and while yours is yours is correct, like that, you're absolutely right. That should be the through line between the first, second, and fifth movies, when we kind of eliminate 3 and 4 because they just tried to ignore that they were connected at all to the Final Destination universe. Parts 1, 2, and 5 all kind of have a connectivity tissue, which is Bloodworth. And you're right, that probably should be the through line with that character, and you kind of reveal that he is, as I said, the hand of death, the archangel of death, whatever. But my suggestion is this, and I'm only saying this because of the title. It's called Final Destination Bloodlines. The problem that we had, and we talked about this, is that in part 1, 2, and I mean, yes, even in 3 and 4, which were just incredibly bad movies, or excuse me, 4 was incredibly bad. 3 wasn't as bad, but 3 just tried to ignore the mythology and tried to figure it out on their own, which again, when you're 3 movies deep, you're kind of making it frustrating for the audience when they know the answers and the characters don't. My theory and my hope is that it's called Final Destination Bloodlines. The lead character, one of the lead characters, their last name better be Browning, or their last name better be Waters, or some shit. Give me a character that has some connection to the original film. And that's what I think was kind of missing in the other movies. Because even if you're not going to have Bloodworth in part 3 and part 4, like, you could just have Alex's dad pop up and say, this is what happened to my son. Maybe he doesn't know all the answers, but he can say, my son was convinced that all his friends were being stalked by death. Oh, okay. They don't know the entire plot, but at least they have an idea of what they're dealing with. You know what I mean? Part 4, they just completely went off the rails, had no idea what they're dealing with. And part 5, as you said, it's almost like they don't give a shit. And then when they figure it out, they're like, oh yeah, if we kill people, we save ourselves. I think if they introduce that in the new one, again, as far as I know, Devon Sawa does not come back in this one, sadly, but have his dad, his mom, He had a brother, which they never introduced in the other one, but sure, why not? A cousin. Or, like I said, there were other characters, Sean William Scott's character, Ali Larter's character, whoever. Have somebody else with that last name pop back up and say, kind of like the other through line of the movies to say, this is what happened to me and my family. Now it's happening to you. Because that was the thing we liked the most when going back to other franchises, when you look at Nightmare on Elm Street, the strongest versions of those movies is part 1 with Nancy Thompson. She comes back in part 3 to give you a through line. Part 4 is an extension of that with Kristen going into part 4, and then part 5 with Alice. And then it falls completely off the rails when you go into Freddy's Dead and has absolutely dick all to do with any of the other movies. Friday the 13th, part of what we liked about Friday the 13th was, the connection from 1 to 2, of course, had a connection. And then you had the little through line. And of course, they brought back the brother, and then of course you had Corey Feldman's character, and then of course the actors changed, but then the Tommy Jarvis character continued on again. And then they got to Manhattan, and they're just like, oh yeah, it didn't matter, fuck all. Like they were just gonna have him in New York, and that's where those movies kind of fall apart, right? Like that's when Friday the 13th just became about let's put Jason in a city and just have him hack people to death. It wasn't as fun, it wasn't as interesting. It was just kind of like there. Make a through line. You're saying with Bloodworth, and I'm saying that's fine. I'm just giving you another example of how they can do it. Give me a Browning family member. Give me some other. We had Clearwater's have her cousin Muddy Waters show up. I don't give a fuck. Some through line.
Well, and it works out well with my idea of making Bloodworth Death or Death's Herald or whatever, where he's actually screwing with the people. He's helping keep the plan in motion. But when you enter a character like, let's just say, Alex's brother, played by Eminem, right? Because that would be apropos. If he comes in and he's like, no, this happened to my brother. Here's what he learned. Here's what he was obsessed with, and he took to the grave or whatever, or the grave. He got hit over the head with a brick based on some, Angel Fire website, according to the second movie. You bring in that character, and they're like, well, wait a minute, that's not lining up with what Bloodworth said. And then it leads to it comes to a head where you realize Bloodworth is fucking with people, and only a character who understood the design can help them through it. A real, true half man, not an unreliable narrator. Again, this is all hypothetical. This is just us playing with the elements that are in play here. In this situation, I call Bloodworth an unreliable narrator, and indeed a mastermind of all of this. And then you bring in an actual half man whose family dealt with it, or hell, surprise us and bring Devin Salvo back. That to me would be a great culmination to go, oh, this is all connected wonderfully. Like I think it would work very well like that.
And the fact that it's called Bloodlines give me some hint that there's got to be something in there. Why would you call it Bloodlines otherwise? Yeah. Yeah,
someone's related, or I guarantee you it's one of our main characters. Whoever had their vision, someone in the past had that vision. It's Clear River's whatever, it's Alex's whatever. Somebody connected to the first one. It's got to be, right? I mean, it feels like a layup at this point.
Yeah, it's got to be something in there. So yeah, I think, and I like the combination of the two ideas. You have the false narrator, and then of course you have the savior. That's a great way to do it. Whatever the case may be, again, it's been 14 years, and there's a real anticipation growing for Final Destination Bloodlines. I'm hoping that this getting the major push it's getting from Warner Brothers, that they actually did put a little bit more time and effort into this one, whereas the last couple just kind of like, yeah, we made money, let's just do another one. Again, I'm shocked they didn't keep going and just drive this thing into the freaking grave. But 14 years later, I'm hoping they are putting a little bit more time and effort into this to actually give us a cohesive story, good performances. Please God, better effects, and you know, a story worthwhile of a new Final Destination movie.
Please, Satan, give us decent CG this time around. We are in desperate need of it.
Yeah, if you hire the people who did the last few Marvel films, we're going to have issues. Patrick, last category, which has become my new favorite category in this one, isn't scary, is it Final Destination-y? So, Patrick, Final Destination 5, is it Final Destination-y?
It is, but boy, it is for what the series has become, which is like almost slapstick deaths. Like, it really is these coincidental goofball deaths, and I feel like 5 leans into it even more than 4 did. 4, and boy, was 4 pushing it. 4 was pushing it desperately. This almost felt like, oh, we're going to trick you, and then they're going to die in a dumb way on purpose. Like, maybe to be funny, maybe because they thought they were making a comedy this time around. But is it in line with the series? It is. It's in line with the series, where the series has evolved. I'm really hoping when we get to Bloodlines, Damon, that I get to say, no, this isn't Final Destination-y. This is Bloodline-y. This is like way better, actually. Like, I'm hoping that they kind of break this cycle of these coincidental kind of goofy deaths.
I will say it is, and I'm saying it is based on one major factor, and that was, even though I thought it was kind of dumb and the mythology changed and it was just like, okay, like you clearly didn't plan on this. You just wanted to introduce a cool twist. I did appreciate the swing they took with the prequel idea that the characters of Sam and Molly got on Flight 180 bound for Paris, and they just happen to be on the same flight that Alex Browning has the premonition. They get off and they stay on the plane and they die very much. And also, by the way, the dumbest scene in this movie is the post scene where the plane wheel flies off and the landing gear flies off and crashes through a building and kills the other guy who sort of got away because he thought he killed the guy to save his life, and then they're like, oh no, he had a brain aneurysm, he was going to die anyways or whatever. I was like, Jesus Christ, like just stop. Like now you got a plane wheel crash. We never heard about that. Did they ever mention that in the original Final Destination? What part of the plane crashed and killed someone else? We just omitted that. And that's why I have a problem when you try to go back and rewrite history. I hate when films do that. But I will say, in that moment, even though I kind of saw it coming, as soon as he said, we're going to a plane for Paris, I was like, you're somehow connecting this to the first one. And it was. I did enjoy that they tried something. It didn't work. And it was really convoluted storytelling, but at least they took a swing. And I was like, okay, that makes it feel Final Destination-y. So I'll give them credit for what is ultimately a swing and a miss, but at least they tried.
They tried. They brought in the investigator again. They brought in Bloodworth again. They tried to get back to the roots of what we all love about Final Destination. They got closer. I think we're going to get even closer with Bloodlines. That's my intuition on this one.
And I got to say one last thing before we get out of here. We are now in an era, and I think this really actually started in the last decade, maybe 15 years, which again, I know kind of teeters on this film coming out in 2011. But we've gotten into the age now of like the Reddit theories, and the most minute mistakes are sussed out by online detectives watching these shows. Yeah. You know, I remember I used to watch a little show called 24, and I loved 24. And when that show came out, the creators, I can't remember what their names were, but the creators said that they knew the episodes actually had to time out to 1 hour because they knew someone would time it, and if it wasn't 1 hour, they would figure it out. They're like, hold on now, this isn't right. Like the actual events took place over 90 minutes or 80 minutes. So like, we have to make sure that a 24 episode series actually goes 24 hours. That's like the end of where like the easiest thing to figure out nowadays. Nowadays, people are like full on like investigative reporters watching TV shows, and if you fuck something up, they will call you out on it. Does it get a little annoying at times? Sure, but I've been guilty of it. I was like, hold on, that's inconsistent. You said it was this, and now it's this, and what? I've been guilty of it too. So I'm hoping with Bloodlines, they realize that if they're going to do the Bloodworth character, or they're going to introduce like Alex's cousin or dad or whoever's going to be in the movie, that they realize that the audience is a lot savvier now.
Yes.
And they have a lot more connection to go on Reddit, and people are like, hold on, this is bullshit, than they did even in 2011. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen in this. I mean, it's happened in every franchise even now. Like, again, like I hear it all the time with Nightmare on Elm Street fans, like, hold on, Freddy was this old here, and now he's this old here, and like they try to figure out.
Well, it's like Scream 6, where you know where Sam is Billy's illegitimate daughter, and you're like, he was in high school. I mean, I'm sure he was getting laid, but you're telling me he had an illegitimate daughter back in high school that we didn't know about? It's soap opera shit. And folks aren't really buying it. You know, they have to buy it because that's what they're selling, but we're more sophisticated than that.
or in Scream 5 when they made, sorry for a movie that's been out for like 8 years now or 7 years, whatever. Mikey Madison, Oscar winner Mikey Madison, is one of the killers. And they're like, great, she's incredible. I love Mikey Madison. She deserved everything she's getting right now. But she's like 5'4", and the killers are not 5'4". So what are we doing here? Like, hold on now. Like, like you did not have a very short killer in this movie. Like, we got to at least a little realism here.
Maybe she's goth and she wears like platform spiked boots or something. It's entirely possible.
Yeah, like I heard that, and it's legit. It's like, hold on now, you're asking me to believe that she's one of the main killers and she's like 5'3". Like, what are we doing here? Like, come on now. Like, like that's like casting Peter Dinklage, and he's like this giant. It's Peter Dinklage. We know he's not 6 foot tall. Like, what?
I know he's not the Ghostface killer.
Yeah, like, what are we doing here? So I hope the savviness and like the nature of people watching movies and TV shows now helps, but wait and see, because they sure didn't give a shit about that in part 4 and 5. We have till May to hope. So, Patrick, yes, that is our episode this week. Our wrap up for the current Final Destination movies. We will review Final Destination Bloodlines in May. As always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in the show. Make sure you check us out on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and over on our YouTube channel. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You'll find us over there. And even if you don't watch us on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It makes a huge difference to us in terms of algorithm and search results and things like that. So please do that if you can. And you can also find all of our reviews, along with other reviews like my Borderline review, over on the website, rewindofthelivingdead.com. You got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, hit us up on email anytime, rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That is rotlivingdead@gmail.com. And you can also find us on social media. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. We are on Twitter/X. We are on Instagram, and we are on Facebook, so you can hit us up there anytime, or you can find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone tuning into the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.